Hi, everybody. I'm Alessandra from Authors A.I. This is First Draft Friday. I'm so excited to be joined today by Judith, Lucci, and Fiona Quinn. These are two rock star authors that have more than 40 bestsellers between them. And today we're going to be talking about a really cool technique that you can use to build amazing characters and plot lines. I was reading over the handout, which I'll provide a link to in just a moment before we begin. And I'm so excited to have you both on First Draft Friday and to share this really interesting, I guess, characterization technique. I don't even know the right word to describe it. But I'm going to turn the mic over to you guys. For those of you who are watching live, feel free to comment and ask questions, and it's going to be a jam-packed half hour, but if we can answer any of your questions, we're going to get to them as many as we can. So I'll turn the mic over to you guys.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi guys, I am delighted to be here. My name is Judith Lucci, and I write medical thrillers, psychological suspense, and cozy mysteries. I pen the Women of Valor world, and my 3 series that are currently part of that world include the Alexandra DiStefano medical thrillers, the Michaela McPherson crime series, and the Sonia Amon medical thrillers. I'm a USA Today and Wall Street Journal published author. In my other life, the one before writing that I think I worked less, I was a doctorally prepared nurse who spent a lifetime in hospitals and medical care facilities in a number of countries around the world. And I am so happy because sitting here right next to me is my amazing friend, Fiona Quinn.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Judith and I met when we were starting our writing careers, and she has been a stalwart friend, and I really appreciate all of her insights that she shares with me. Like Judith, I have a bunch of degrees in my background, but for the sake of today's talk, I'm going to be wearing my psychology hat. I have a master's degree in counseling from the Medical College of Virginia. As a writer, I'm a Kindle Scout winner. I've been on the USA Today bestseller list 5 times and have been an Amazon top 100 mystery thriller suspense author. For the most part, I'm writing action, adventure, romance. I have a 20 books into my Iniquitous world, which is ex-special forces, where I use my fighting background, my survival skills, and my emergency management experience on the pages of the book. And from that background, I learned about OODA loops. OODA is spelled O-O-D-A. OODA loops, which is the subject of today's talk. And so OODA loops is one of the techniques that I've always applied to my writing to bring my readers along on the same ride as my characters.
So we're going to be talking about OODA loops today, and with a special emphasis on the importance of perception and the use of our senses when we're developing characters and scenes. We will have a handout, as Alessandra just told us, for you, so the major takeaways will be on that handout. So we're going to go through this, and we're hoping that it'll be useful to you as you begin to work on your manuscript. And Fiona, since this is sort of like your model, why don't you introduce us to it?
Okay, so for those unfamiliar with the concept of the OODA loop, it is, again, O-O-D-A, and those letters stand for observe, orient, decide, act. The term OODA loop was coined in the 1950s by Colonel John Boyd. He was a fighter pilot at the end of the Korean War, and he was piloting an F-86. And they were wondering why the pilots were not being as effective on their mission. So he took it upon himself to look into that, and he realized that every pilot came to the mission with a different way of observing, orienting, and then deciding, and that impacted how what actions they took. So he looked at the precipitate to action in the OODA loop, and as Judith and I will be talking about today, note that if you're a new author, you'll find that using OODA loops give you and your characters added dimension If you're an advanced author, this might be a new way to frame some of the techniques you already use, and also be a way for you to reimagine a scene if you get stuck. Ask yourself, okay, what is my character experiencing through their senses, and how does that create a feedback loop that determines their next actions?
Okay, so the first step, as Fiona said, is to observe what's happening around the character. This is really, really important because it orients us and eventually our readers to the scene, and it helps us decide what to do next. There are often unfolding circumstances, for example, the weather, which we're experiencing here now with Hurricane Laura, the time of day, perhaps a new sound, maybe some outside interference, a helicopter, anything that your character may hear will perhaps unfold an interaction with his or her environment. For instance, think about a gunshot that might occur. So because observation is so important and it sets the stage for us as writers, we're going to introduce the beginning of the action loop with the memory. It could be a thought, an aha moment as part of a conversation, or something that is generally almost always sensory based. The phone rings. The sound of that phone spurs your character to move within the scene. Perhaps the person on the other end of the phone is hysterical or maybe even uncertain. Maybe it's a cry for help. In my first novel, Chaos at Crescent City Medical Center, I have a Mardi Gras scene that illustrates these concepts. Now, if any of you guys have actually ever really been to Mardi Gras, you know that you'll see observations there and orientations like you've never experienced before. But we're not going to talk about those completely today. But here's a quick scene from Chaos. The pungent smell of Cajun spices permeated the February New Orleans air. With only 1 week before Carnival, the French Quarter blazed with activity. Ornate iron balconies bowed beneath the weight of dozens of people pressed closely together for a better look at the street. Being up on a balcony during Mardi Gras was prestigious, and it gave one an immense sense of power and control over the crowd. People in the streets would do just about anything for a Mardi Gras throw, a string of plastic beads or an aluminum doubloon. So you can see in this scene how I've described what's actually going on in the environment there in that Mardi Gras moment. And then I move on with the next part of the OODA loop, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But you can see that the reader can visualize, and they can hear, and they can smell, and they can actually see what's going on in that scene. Would you agree, Fiona?
It would. And the interesting thing about using that Mardi Gras scene is that it is so sensory rich, right? The sound and the smell and the just the vibration of the whole area. And so when you are writing that, your character is going to have to make those observations, but they're also going to orient to one or two, the ones that are most important. So we know that our brain absorbs millions of pieces of data all the time, but it filters down. I'll give you an example. Your eyes can see your nose all the time, but your eyes tell your brain that that nose is all there and not important. So we never see our nose, but it's there. It's right there in our visual field. So, so we have the observation. Those are that's the thing that catches the brain, right? When you are making the decision about orienting your character, so your observation to orientation, you have to consider each individual character and what they would find was important. If you have several characters in a scene, each one will have a different observation and a different orientation to it, leading to a different decision and a different action. So I think I'm going to talk, Judith, if you remind me, I want to talk about a scene in a minute. But let's talk about some things about your character that might change their observations and their orientations. It could be heritage and cultural traditions. It could be previous experience, education and training, gender, job history. It could be mental health. For example, researchers have identified a gene that amplifies the feeling of endangerment. People with this gene, it's believed, they're in the beginning scientific study of this, will experience the events with more of a hormone actions that derive from the anxiety, their reactions to the situation. They'll be secreting more adrenaline, more cortisol, which will affect their eyesight and their hearing acuity. Their physical ability. So when you're writing the scene, if like me, your character wears glasses, if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm hunting for those glasses because without them, I can't see. And that would change my not only what I observe, how I view things, but also how much anxiety I feel around not being able to see clearly if there's something that needs my attention. This might also even be something like hearing. And I'll give you an example from my life. I am a homeschooling mother of 4. So I raised 4 kids. Sometimes they needed to be separated out. I could put 4 kids in 4 different rooms and listen to their activities and know if they were on task or if a mom needed to go and intervene. At night, because my husband traveled, I was the only adult in the house. And so I had a heightened hearing acuity. Even a small noise would spring me from my sleep because I knew I was the sole adult who was in charge of an infant, a toddler, and 2 little kids, that I had to save them from the fire, the burglar, whatever happened, So I was always primed. My husband, on the other hand, was, traveled alone. He didn't have to weigh in with anybody else. At night, his perceptions closed in on him because in a hotel, he didn't want to hear other people. He didn't want to be sprung from his sleep. And so we had completely different abilities to hear and perceive because we trained that into ourselves. Judith, I was reading in your new witch book where you were illustrating perception and observation. Can you share an excerpt from that?
Sure. This is another example of sensory observation. This is a new series for me. It hasn't been published yet. The title of the book is called Seer of Evil, and the main character is Mara, and she is a psychic witch and an investigative reporter for the Times-Picayune. Blinding pain and bright light seared my brain. I covered my eyes and grabbed my head to stop the agony. It didn't help. Stumbling from my bed, I grasped my bedpost for support and made my way into the bathroom. I bent over, turned on the water, and bathed my face. I was so weak, I had to rest my arms on the sink. A moment later, I was sickened by the stench of rotting flesh and dead fish. A dampness permeated my body. The smell of death was in the air, and I knew that he was here in my house. But who was he? Who was this man in the mist? That I did not know, and it terrified me. What did he want? Why did he want me? And most of all, why had he invaded my life and my dreams? So as you can tell, Mara has observed some stuff here that she really can't cannot explain, and she's clearly in pain, but she's in psychogenic pain, and she's also in physical pain, and I can feel her emotion when I read it, and I'm really hopeful that my readers are going to feel that same emotion. So, picking your sensory words and making those descriptions are very, very important, I think, when you're setting the scene.
Right.
Fiona, you've got an experience that encompasses several authors, several characters.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Just going back for a second, I wanted to say that, that disorientation is also an orientation, and
Yeah.
you just oriented your character so that your readers are also asking those questions. And when you ask your readers questions as if they're part of the scene, then you're pulling those readers along with you. It's a psychological trick that counselors use, and so what you want to do is you're taking them along that same path with you. There's asking that disorientation and asking the questions and hoping to gather more information through observation are really interesting tricks for craft tricks for authors to use. So when that was a single character in a scene. So let's look at a scene where we have different characters who observe and orient and then decide and act in different ways. I'm going to put you in a gas station. You've gone in to pay for your gas. You are buying yourself a chocolate bar. You're up there paying your money, and a guy comes in with a gun. Skipping forward, the police are asking the 3 people who were in there, what did you see? What did you do, and why did you do it? So, for example, if we had an artist in there, the artist might remark of their facial features, trying to remember them so that if the guy got away and the cameras weren't working, that she could draw a good rendering of that image for the police and they could go after him. Or she might have, through the way she has observed and drawn faces in the past, she might notice that emotion that is on the face is pain. And she may decide, well, I think that what he did was come in here to get money for drugs, and I'm going to give him some money. I'm just going to give him my wallet so that he knows I want him to get that pain relief, and he won't point the gun at me. A physical therapist who was in there might have noticed that when he came in that he was dragging his leg and he had a difficult gait. She knows from what she's observing that he won't be able to chase after her. So as soon as the gun is pointed elsewhere, she dashes out the door and around the corner so she's not in the trajectory of the bullet, knowing that he will not chase her down. If you had a soldier in there, she might not be watching the man's face at all. She might be leaning on her training to look at the hands, because the hands are where the danger lies. And as the criminal moves the gun to the side and he's sweeping over everyone, trying to, be menacing and subdue them, the soldier waits her turn to leap in and grab hold of the slide on the 1911, drag the gun over so it's pointing at the back wall. And sure, the guy gets the shot off, but because of the soldier's training, she knows that the next round can't chamber. She slams him with her knee into the groin, puts him on the ground, and that's how that soldier took him down, right? So 3 completely different perceptions, 3 completely different ways of responding to a threat, but it's the same threat.
And that directly goes back to what you had said earlier, why the gentleman developed the model to begin with.
Right.
Yeah, so that's just a really clear explanation of it. Well, now we need to talk about the physical act of decision making, because that's another part of this model. And if you think about it, when we make decisions, we have 2 ways in which we make them. We can make a cognizant decision, which is based on, a thinking process, hopefully. I certainly hope it is. Or you could have also a reflexive decision. Say, for instance, the baby's falling, so the mother reaches out and her hand shoots out and she catches the baby in the blink of an eye. But what we want to talk about here particularly is, why would your character pick one action or another? How do they decide A over B? So let's think about this a little bit. Is it a really hard decision for them to make? Is it a very painful decision? What stood in their way? What are the objectives of that decision? What needs to happen? is there a distortion of these people's senses? Certainly when we go back about Mara and the man in the mist, her senses were distorted to some degree. Do they have tunnel vision? Are they able to hear? What is the most important tool that they'll be using in that decision? Is it based on morality or greed? Is it based on survival? Are these people habituated to making stressful decisions? In Fiona's books, I know that all of her guys are spec op kinds of people, and they're kind of used to dealing with situations. Mara, my character, really isn't, because she's an investigative reporter. So always remember that when your character is making a painful decision, there's going to be an adrenaline flow there. You guys can remember the fight and flight, and they can also be frozen, because they can't move or do anything, and that would equate with the loss of function. So these are just a couple of ideas that you need to think about when you're making a decision.
Sorry, Judith, I was just going to throw in there that it also has to do with the relationship. So, for example, I'm trained in responding, and I'm trained as an emergency counseling emergency response person. So I'm trained to be in stressful situations. I'm trained to function with my first aid. And I can do that. I have done that. I've saved people's lives. But when my kid is on the floor, I can tell you that my ability to struggle through that adrenaline to save my child is a very, very different, experience. The soldier on the battlefield who's around blood might be able to be just fine with that blood, but when he's watching his baby being born, that might put him on the floor. He may just get away with that one. So you not just assuming that your character, and it's really interesting and telling and has some depth to it. It makes your character more 3D when something is thrown into the mix that makes them act out of character, and then they are startled by their own actions or reactions.
And I think I deal with a lot of new authors, and I think if you're a new author and you're watching this, the other thing you need to remember is the instinct is to write how you would react in that situation, and you have to remember your character and their backstory and however you've built them. And so I see in a lot of new authors writing, their character is behaving the way that they would react to that. But like you said, like a Navy SEAL is going to react differently than a housewife mother who's, maybe never been in a stressful situation.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I spent many, many years in emergency rooms, and the responses that you think you're going to get, and boy, do you find out you're really not going to get that response. So it's a very individual type of thing, and it's a floating thing. It depends on what else is going on in the environment. So it's
fatigue, hunger. I mean, how many of us have been hangry at someone who didn't deserve it, and right. it was a physical problem. So let's see. We were talking about the differences between characters, and the differences that they've observed. Something is seen, they've oriented based on who they are and what they've experienced, what they know. They've decided on the actions that they're going to take to the situation, and then they're going to decide and they're going to act. And then what happens next is you start all over again. We are constantly making this loop. And sorry.
Yes, it is. It's a circular motion. It's a loop.
So one thing leads to another, and that's how you kind of roll your character through the plot line. I'm going to, I think, give you an example of how a person can start a loop. And another craft trick, is to start your character through a loop and then throw them for a loop by changing their orientation. Okay. So this is a story about Barbara, who is called to reception. There's a bouquet of beautiful flowers waiting for her, and she's all smiles. she's excited, she's happy, she beams as she walks back to her cubicle, grinning and blushing, accepting her compliments and comments from her colleagues, because these flowers must be from the guy. He is the guy, and now that he sent flowers, she knows he feels the same way. And so she gets to her desk, she puts the flowers down, she picks at the card, and she gives the envelope a little kiss, and then slides it out to read the letter. And she finds out it's from the creeper who's been kind of hanging out in the lobby making comments to her. And he said, "You look beautiful last night." And she was at home. So she grabs the flowers, completely reoriented, not only just reoriented, but it's worse, because it wasn't like she got the flowers, she read the thing, she threw them in or said, "We need to call the police." It was, she had oriented herself to, oh, the guy feels the same way I do. I'm so in love. This is going to be great. We're heading into our bliss. But no, instead, it's the exact opposite. And so, taking your loop and playing with it a little bit is sometimes a lot of fun. So showing your characters making mistakes in that loop helps us to understand the character's inner fears and their inner desires, and also your character's mindset. Because, for example, that might have been the way that you told your readers for the first time that she had decided that the blind date from last night, that guy was the one, and that was the way she conveyed that. And then we just smack it. We ruined it for them.
He really wasn't the one.
It wasn't him.
It really wasn't him.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you write about a character, who's making a sensory observation, don't just use the word she saw him and he was a creep, or use some, make it more sensual. Put some body sensations in there, such as heat, or actually pull into play the sixth sense that people often have. Intuition is an incredible sixth sense that we use all the time. So don't just say, jazz it up a little bit, not just, she's tasted the bile or whatever. Make it,
the bile slicked the back of her tongue. Like that. And everyone can taste it, right? Everyone's had bile.
Yeah. Ooh,
you get the texture and the taste of bitter. Yeah, it's very sensory. And I'm going to add in there that one of the senses that's left out a lot is the sense of smell. And it's often our first warning, we smell the smoke. And so, but it's also one of those things that is psychologically the most profound, is the one that brings up memory. And so you can use the smell that to evoke a memory that then you get to share a little paragraph or two about your character's past, which edifies the situation or where their mind is at or where that smell took them to, which might have been very different from the sensation they had before they opened the door and were enwrapped in the smell of chocolate chip cookies. So if I say they were enwrapped in the smell of chocolate chip cookies, instead of saying she smelled the chocolate chip cookies baking, what you get is the sense of a hug, and you also get that lovely, warm, familial childhood goodness that's in there. And then you can step on that by making something bad happen. But for that moment, they're smelling it. And
keep them guessing.
Just fool your readers all the time. They think it's going to be good. It's not. But I'm going to add in there, and here's another one that you can use, because it's a throwback to our ancient brains, that if you hand someone a newborn baby, one of the things they will do very frequently is bend over and breathe in the top of that infant's head. And that's imprinting that child in the brain, right? You would never go to someone's 10-year-old child and lean over and sniff their head. It's just not done. But when they're an infant, it is done all the time. And the next time you see it happen is when you have made a couple bonding relationship. So a husband and wife, your character is newly in love. They're in love. When they love each other as a couple, and they will breathe in the other person. And if you mention that, the person who's reading may not get what that means, but their brain gets what that means. So it's a little layer of something that will. So you will often see when my couples fall in love, you know it because they're breathing each other.
Yeah. So I think that what we're saying in so many words is that you really want to describe the scene so that we all know what's happening. The reader knows what's happening. Remember when we talked about Mara a little bit ago? We could sense and actually smell her fear. So consider using a lot of sensory actions when you're writing. So when you're standing at the sink, the character could put their hands under the hot water, or they could slide across greasy pans, anything to make your
grass walking through the window, right?
Yeah, anything to make your reader be there with you and with that character, because that is what is so critical about this.
Right. So in the OODA loops,
it just takes practice.
It does take practice. And when you're doing things, you can kind of practice on yourself. What am I observing? How did I orient to that? I hear a car coming in. Wait, that's not my engine. There must be someone coming up the driveway that I don't know. I better go look out the window. An decision is made and action is taken. So when we talked about your characters' backgrounds and their personality aspects and how that'll affect a new loop, and that no two people and no two characters will ever respond to the same event in the same way. And we have put together the main points of this talk on that handout we mentioned earlier, and we hope it helps. And thank you for coming and hanging out with us and talking about OODA loops.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. It was fun. We've talked about it. It's a simple action model that will assist you writers in expressing their characters and their emotions, and will actually help you think through your scenes. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact either Fiona or myself on our websites, or here at Authors A.I. Would be delighted to talk to you more, even though you probably don't want that. But anyway, we had a great time. It was fun. Thank you so much, guys, for listening.
Thank you both for coming. This was really fascinating. And do you go through this loop with every scene? I mean, not that the characters have to make big decisions in every scene, but is it pretty much from one loop to another as you move through the book?
So I'm just going to answer that for me, because I'm trained in that. That's when I'm listening. When I was a counselor and I was listening to my clients, I would listen for those OODA loops. What did they observe? Mm-hmm. What were they oriented to? What was the decision, the action, right? So for me, it comes naturally. It's something that's part of my writing as a natural course because I trained myself to do that. And so with a little practice, it's fairly easy. But there are also times when I come to a point in my scene, I know kind of where it needs to go. I'm not sure how to get it there. Or I feel like the reader might not understand this decision or this action. So I better orient the reader by giving them an observation or take them along for the ride. I sometimes will go back and say, this is lacking a spark. And then I might try to add the OODA loop so I can get the reader there, or it can drive new thoughts. I get to know my characters that way. They surprise me. I'll be typing something out, and my characters will always surprise me with their depth and their three-dimensionality when I apply this.
Yeah. For me, I think that the more you write, the more it almost happens automatically without you deliberately looking for each letter in the OODA loop. I do think, though, that a special use of this model is if you have a problem scene, a scene that's very difficult for you to write, that you're just really not getting it, I think this is a wonderful way to refine that scene and to go back and to make sure that you've done what, or your character has done, and you, the author, has done what needs to happen in that scene. So it's great. It's a great little model. It's anybody can use it. It's not scary, so that's important.
Scary, that's not.
It's not scary. We don't
Not
like scary.
scary.
We just write
I
scary.
was a little afraid before y'all came on. I was intimidated because it sounds fancy and complicated. But it was great to hear from both of you, and I'm really excited. I wrote down a few notes like sensory actions. I realized as Judith was talking, I don't use nearly enough sensory, like what my characters are touching and feeling. I think I've just skipped that from my last 20 books. So I need to.
Well, it's really important when especially if you're having a lot of dialogue, to remind you can disorient your reader if they don't get a periodic reminder of where you are. So you don't want to keep going in the living room. So you would say, she moved over to the couch and pushed the cushions to the side, but threw the cushions on the floor where the dog, next to the dog, or, just little sensory things that reorient the direction, or the sunlight was hitting her in the eye, so she moved to the side. Whatever it is, it reminds your reader where they are, so they know who's speaking, where they are, and that gives them a sense of equilibrium that is psychologically soothing.
Yeah. And what you ultimately want to do is you want to have your reader feel like they're part of that scene, because if they're a part of that scene, they are really into your book. And so that's ultimately, I think, what all of our goals are. Sometimes it just takes a little longer to get there. So, but you can do it. It's fun. It really is.
Well, thank you both for joining us. We'll put in the comment section both of their websites if you want to check out Fiona and Judith's books. And if you missed a handout, that handout is also in the comment section, so you can download it there. So thank you both. This is First Draft Friday. If you enjoyed today's chat, please check out our other chats at Authors.ai. You can visit our First Draft Friday section, or check out Marlo, who is an artificial intelligence developmental editor. She can read your entire manuscript in a matter of minutes and give her feedback. So please visit Authors.ai or join us for a future First Draft Friday. Thank you both again, and thank you for everyone who joined in today.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.